to the third in a series of Phase 2 Southeast Guiding Coalition meetings. Um, we held two meetings, as you know, earlier in the year, in the spring, to launch the Phase 2 process. Then we took a break to accommodate summer plans. Tonight, we're going to resume from where we stopped, and we're going to hopefully revisit what we landed on in Phase 1, which was to find feeder patterns for Kellogg Middle School. That's done. And now we are looking at the Phase 2 charge. My name is Esther Mogbenyi. I am Regional Superintendent, Elementary Schools, Portland Public Schools. As is consistent with our practice at Portland Public Schools, I'd like to extend our warmest welcome to members of our Board of Directors, Ailey Lowry, Michelle DePass, and Julia Brim Edwards. I also would like to welcome Flow Analytics, Karina, and the Building Relationship Inspiring Communities Architectural Firm, short for their acronym is BRIC. So if I say BRIC during the presentation, you'll know who I'm referring to. They are our newest partners. I also would like to extend our welcome to our principals and our Southeast Guiding Coalition members, as well as the PPS team headed by Claire Hertz. Tonight, we are going to be looking at Phase 2. However, before we go on to address the Phase 2 charge, I do want to acknowledge some of the things that we have gleaned in the Phase 1 experience and that we've incorporated into our Phase 2 practices to enable us to make our process smoother. Based on your input and feedback from Phase 1, we made revisions. Our principals asked, for example, that they would like to have the opportunity to share the role of being present in the meetings. We all know that this process is very time consuming, it requires a whole lot of commitment and dedication. So we honored that request. As a result, our principals have chosen to have 6 peer elected members who will represent them in meetings. They will take turns as needed. The peer elected members break down into 2 elementary principals, 2 middle school principals, and 2 K-8 principals. These principals will gather information from the Southeast Guiding Coalition meeting, and they will share the information with their peers and their colleagues in a different forum. Their responsibility also will include taking information from the principals and reporting it back to the larger group of Southeast Guiding Coalition reps. The BRIC facilitators are joining us tonight. BRIC community is known for its focused architectural firm work alongside student educators and other local long-range facilities plan that include involving BIPOC stakeholders in their processes, and hence our decision to invite them to provide guidance and support in the Southeast Guiding Coalition process. Because we continue to seek ways to be all-inclusive, maximize participation, and have all voices heard, and also recognizing that people or reps have very busy lives, we have proposed, again, based on feedback and input, a co-chair process. We continue to seek volunteers to engage in this process. The launch process, which began in May, in the launch process, which began in May, we learned about the goals of racial equity and social justice through Danny Ledesma. We also heard from our principals. We will continue the launch process and add the listening and learning session through October 7. Beginning October 21, we will brainstorm our draft scenarios. We intend to listen and test the proposed draft scenarios starting on November 8. We will work to improve the scenarios from November 18 to December 2. We will test and listen on December 6 and 14, and then hopefully finalize a recommendation by January 6. Recommendations will be sent to the Deputy Superintendent Claire Hertz and to the board shortly after that. Our Phase 2 charge will complete with the middle grades transformation that started in phase one. It is centered on the conversion of Harrison Park from K-8 to a middle school, to Harrison Park from K-8 to a middle school and increasing the enrollment at Lane Middle School. This also means that we do have to find a home for our K-5 students from Harrison Park. The charge will also address as many K-5 issues and align other elementary school boundaries and special programs with middle school. Tonight, you will meet ASDs who will support BRIC facilitators in the breakout rooms. That said, I do also want to go through our land acknowledgement and anti-oppression statement. Within Portland Public Schools, today we serve students and families representing more than 150 tribal nations within our education system. It is our obligation to teach accurate information, past and present, about the impact of colonization on our students, all students today, and make visible the multitude of Native families and many diverse ways Native communities and families are living in the present. In addition to acknowledging the land and those who have been here since time began, we must also remember our stolen siblings from Africa whose labor built the vast wealth of this country. These two communities and the atrocities committed against them are intrinsically intertwined due to our existence within a white supremacist world. Everything we have is due to stolen land and stolen labor, and every system and institution that impacts our lives is built upon this legacy. It is our job to speak that truth into spaces so that we can begin to heal. Next slide, please. The BRIC team is made up of Karina Ruiz, Elisa Wana, and Mani Mikowski. If I murdered your name, pardon me, please. They will be in the rooms facilitating and presenting, and our ASDs, our area senior directors, will be in there to support as well. We have our principal representatives tonight, and as I said earlier, we are still seeking volunteers to assume the co-chair role. Next slide, please. So the charge tonight will be to complete the middle grades transformation begun in phase one, centered on the conversion of Harrison Park from K-8 to a middle school. And the second part of that will be to increase the enrollment at Lane Middle School. The process will also address as many K-5 issues as feasible in order to make a new K-5 home for Harrison Park students and align other elementary school boundaries and special programs with middle school changes. Next slide. As stated earlier, we started the lunch phase in May, had 2 meetings in the spring. We will continue the lunch phase tonight and then transition into the learn phase. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. We do have an overview of the meetings that will soon be projected. We will also have breakout sessions in which you will, of course, be hearing more information from BRIC and our ASDs. That said, I would like to hand over to Ms. Karina Ruiz.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. We wanted to do it's a pleasure for us to be here tonight and to be part of this great process. So we wanted to do a brief check-in tonight to just be sure that everyone was kind of in the room together and being able to get to know one another kind of in smaller groups. So we're going to send you all to a breakout room. And we are going to focus in that breakout room. We'd like you to each share your name, kind of what your connection is to the school district, and then answer this question. So take your turns answering this question. So knowing what you know now, what advice would you give your 10-year-old self? Okay. So the way that this is going to work is we'll send you, like I said, into your breakout rooms. You'll have between 2 to 2.5 minutes per person. Maybe go in alphabetical order, so that way you don't go whose turn is it. And yeah, just get to know one another a little bit better. So Marnie will put us into breakout rooms.
Marnie is having technical difficulties. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I am really going to try to send you to these rooms. My Zoom is being very strange. I'm going to send you off to Zoom. To breakout rooms, you will just automatically go. You don't need to push anything. You'll be in there for a few minutes. I can't put anything in chat because I seem to not have access to the chat. So if my co-host could help me do that, they'll put the question in the chat. That will go with you into the breakout room with you. And you'll have about 2.5 minutes per person. I have one room that has 3 people right now. And you're going to go in alphabetical order. You're going to listen to hear, not to respond, and say, thank you for sharing that with me when you're done. Okay, so cross your fingers. Here we go. I'm going to open.
You were giving your 10-year-old self. Anyone want to share? While we all gather back in here.
Well, we decided we just please ourselves. You know, be who you are, please yourself.
Nice.
And don't worry about others.
Nice.
Don't stop speaking Spanish.
To start, don't stop. Spanish. Perfect.
Don't stop. If you don't lose it, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Exactly. Be yourself and embrace it. Those are some great lessons. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you enjoyed that time to get to know at least one other person in our group. Like I said, what we wanted to focus on now is just getting our group agreements underway. So these are group agreements that were created, I think, early on in the process, and we just want to take a moment to acknowledge them again and to see if there's anything that anyone needs added to this tonight to feel like you can participate in with your full self. So we're going to encourage everyone to stay engaged, recognizing that this is dinner time for some of you. So certainly, if any of you need to go and tend to that, please tend to yourself first, you and your families. We want everyone to speak their truth responsibly, respectfully, and really just listen to understand, right? Some of the things that we may be hearing may be experiences that we don't have any familiarity with, right? So we always talk about being empathetic learners, but sometimes you don't have to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Sometimes you just have to believe that their experience is their experience and trust in that. And then, you know, be willing to do things differently and experience discomfort. That's a major component of the work that we're going to be doing tonight. And certainly in a process like this, we have to be willing to expect and accept non-closure, right? This is a long arc of a process, and we will likely not end up with clean outcomes at the end of every meeting, because it's going to be a sequence of meetings for us to get to a series of outcomes. The goal is, however, to have some good conversations in these meetings that build on each other, such that when we get to the outcomes, they can be the best outcomes that we can possibly have. Okay. Any questions about those? Anyone have anything that you want to add? Anything you need tonight? Okay. Thank you. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about was kind of part of the reason why we were brought on board, but to really talk about some updates, if you will, to the community engagement approach that we're using here in phase 2 of the Southeast Guiding Coalition. So I know it's hard to read kind of some of the details in this bubble. Hopefully you all have, I think you all have access to the slides directly, but really the sort of traditional approach to engagement, it's one we see not only in design processes, but in processes overall. It starts with a steering committee, so a select group of people that then kind of hand choose. In our case, it would be a guiding coalition. It could be a design committee. It could be whatever it is, but those folks are usually comprised of people that in some way or another are already connected to the district. And then you go out and you do community listening, right, to kind of impact that work. What we have found in doing this work and trying to create a more inclusive and equitable engagement process is that what we really need to do is foreground the community listening and learning before we begin to do our work. So, and use that not as a, in this case, for example, not as a way to test scenarios or to provide input, but rather to try to better understand the problem we're trying to solve before we begin the work of solving it, right? I always like to say that we focus these conversations on folks who are typically closest to the problem and the experience, and typically furthest from the solution and the power. So we have identified a series of sort of disruptions to the systems of oppression and inequity that a system or an approach like this brings. And really what we've tried to do is create a series of affinity-based dialogue sessions.
Yeah, he went to go play.
Yeah, I told him that it was okay.
I'm going to do quick mute. A series of affinity-based dialogue sessions that we started here in September. There is a flyer that has been circulated in your community. We hope that those of you that are in either Lane or Harrison Park or surrounding communities have seen this flyer, but really looking to get the feedback, like I said, of those communities that have been traditionally and historically most impacted by oppression. And so we are intending, like I said, to get that feedback prior to our next SEGC meeting. And we will share that with you because, again, we want that to be a lens or a filter through which the work that we do to create scenarios and various options is that you look at that through that lens, right? And really hope that that ResJ lens will start to not only create potentially better scenarios, but allow us to analyze them in a more critical way. Does anyone have questions about that? Okay. So I think really I'm going to give you actually a minute to, we have such a large group tonight. I want to be sure that we're allowing ample time for any questions. If you have any questions about the engagement process, please open your mic and let us hear them. Any concerns? All right, Jed, I'm going to stop sharing so that you can take over share. So now we're going to turn it over to Jed and his team at Flow Analytics, and they're going to walk us through and introduce us to the scenario evaluation tools that you'll be using moving forward and allow you to spend a little bit of time kind of in that sandbox playing with that so that way we can start to understand how that's all going to work. All right, Jed, it's all yours.
All right, thanks so much, Karina. Can folks see my 2021-22 baseline enrollment? You can, I got the thumbs up. Thanks so much. Well, my name is Jed Roberts, for those couple folks that weren't in the breakout room with me. I'm an analyst with Flow Analytics, and I have along with me Ethan Poole and Rachel Roberts, who will also be helping out in the breakout rooms that we do a little bit later here. So like I said, with Flow Analytics, we're a Portland-based data analytics firm. Flow has been working with PPS since 2019 on this multi-phase enrollment balancing effort. So I know some of you from our work last fall, and it's good to see you again. So this is a part of the meeting where you'll get familiar with some of the data and tools we'll be using to make sense of scenarios and potential options down the road. I want to stress that these quantitative tools that we're going to go over tonight, they really only provide one perspective on some pretty complicated issues, and that this isn't just a numbers game. So before I launch into just the rest of my slides here, I just also want to say that you know, I'm personally connected to this work because I live in the Arleta neighborhood. So it's clear to me that, you know, our team's ability to support the Guiding Coalition here really impacts my immediate community here, and that's with me as I work with you all. So I want to lead with the ways we'll be tracking whether or not enrollment scenarios replicate racial inequalities. And so to ensure that we're aligned with the district's racial equity goals, we've worked with PPS to develop a set of racial equity impact measures and assessment tools. And so what we did was we researched some similar products from other districts in the city of Portland, and you can see that we've included some of those resources here. The measures that we'll be looking at, they're subject to continued improvement, and we, of course, are going to welcome your questions and suggestions along the way. So here's just a quick process flow of how enrollment problems are tested with potential solutions or scenarios. It's really an iterative process where we test scenarios and ask how well they do to address problems experienced by key racial groups. And when we feel we have a viable option, we then summarize how that in fact does address the problem. So as I mentioned, the quantitative piece of this, it provides one perspective, but this really needs to be a two-pronged approach. And so you've heard from Karina about ongoing efforts to engage those who are most impacted. And we'll be working with BRIC and PPS to support those efforts going forward with data and maps. Of course, that is when data and maps are actually helpful. So we'll be cognizant of that. So next, I'm going to walk you through a series of problem statements and measures that will help us pay attention to who benefits and who is burdened. So our first problem statement is that students who attend schools with low enrollment miss out on experiences and opportunities. So with guidance from the district's instructional leadership, we developed two racial equity impact measures to track this particular problem, which are the percentage of students attending middle schools with enrollment higher than 500, and for elementary schools with enrollment higher than 270. Our second problem statement is that overcrowding negatively impacts students, staff, and culture. And so we'll be tracking this problem by highlighting the percentage of students who attend schools with enrollment at or above 80% of their school's capacity. And our third problem statement is that when schools are close to home, students and families are better able to participate in what their school has to offer. And we also know that walkability is vital for families without reliable transportation. So we'll be tracking this problem by highlighting the percentage of students who reside within 1 mile of their school. And so before I show you where we're at with these measures in the baseline, I'm going to review some terminology and provide you an updated picture of enrollment for the Southeast region and schools. Okay, so terminology. Here's some common terms that we're going to be using throughout the process. So these are good ones to memorize. So high school cluster. So this is a group of schools that feed into a single high school. For the district, this is often an administrative geography as well. The feeder pattern. This is the path taken from elementary school to middle school and on to high school. A thematic focus option. So this is a program with a unique or specialized curriculum or teaching style, and it's available through an annual lottery. That's how you enroll. Dual language immersion program. So this is a bilingual instruction with seats that are set aside for native speakers of the target language. This can sometimes be a whole school, but it's very often, especially in the Southeast, co-located with a neighborhood program, which brings me to neighborhood programs, which are standard teaching and learning programs, and those are enrolled through a geographic attendance area. And then finally, grade configuration. We'll use this one a lot. The grades serviced by a school. So very common for us to have K-5, otherwise known as elementary, and 6-8, otherwise known as middle school. And we do have a couple of K-8 servicing schools in the Southeast region. Okay, now for some data. So let me paint the picture here. So this chart, this chart shows historical enrollment going back to 2015 for high school clusters that cover Southeast Portland. And the three lines that you see, they represent the elementary grade group, the middle school grade group, and high schoolers. And at the top line there, our largest group, you see that elementary school enrollment was experiencing basically an ongoing decline that was really exacerbated by the pandemic. Middle school, on the other hand, was holding pretty steady throughout, and high school was actually on the rise. So let's look forward in time. This chart shows projected enrollment going forward to the 2025-26 school year for the same area. Here we're seeing an expected bounce back of elementary school enrollment, but still the overall trend is a loss in enrollment. This downward trend, you can see it now extends up to the middle school grades. So we're seeing that grade progression start to play out. And then similarly, we're starting to see the high school enrollment flattening as those students move through the system. And so just a side note here that we don't yet have certified enrollment counts for the 2021-22 school year, which is why you see it here as a projection. We're expecting those official numbers in November. Okay, so let's zoom in a little bit. This chart provides school by school detail of historical enrollment back to the 2016 school year for elementary and K-8 schools in Southeast. And you can see the enrollment count by year below the bar chart there, and the colors tying to the different colors of the bars. So this chart is showing only neighborhood enrollment. And if we go back to our terminology, we remember that neighborhood programs are those that are enrolled through those geographic attendance areas. And this is about half of the elementary and K-8 schools that have neighborhood programs in Southeast. The rest are on the following slides. But just the notes here on the side, what you can see is that the overall trend for elementary is it's not felt evenly across the schools. Even though it is overall going down, in fact, we actually have some schools that were on the rise, like Arleta, Creston, Marysville, and Woodstock, which had sort of been bucking the trend. And here are the rest of those neighborhood elementary and K-8 schools. And I'm just gonna quickly move through this slide here, but I know somebody here tonight has an affinity for each of these schools. So please take the time to look through this more carefully. I know that these slides I believe they've gone out. If they haven't, they will be shared out. So again, the same information here, but this time for focused option elementary and K-8 schools. And you'll see both dual language immersion and the thematic focus option programs here, which are sometimes grouped under the umbrella term of just focus options. And so that's what's happening here. You'll see just across the chart there, programs like Spanish DLI, shortened SPDLI, or Chinese DLI, shortened CHDLI there. And then CSS is the creative science program. And so nearly all of these are co-located with neighborhood programs that you saw on the previous slides, just a couple exceptions. And really one thing to point out here is that while elementary enrollment is declining, we see focus option schools and programs impacted less than the neighborhood programs. So now on to middle school neighborhood programs. And you'll notice a glaring gap here, which is the enrollment information for Kellogg Middle School, which again, we'll be looking to get those official counts soon. Just to note that in the meantime, we're using projected enrollments and the tools that we'll show you in a little bit here. But overall, we're just seeing a slight decline for middle school neighborhood programs in enrollment. And finally, we have middle school focus option enrollment, which is actually up quite a bit due to new program offerings and just overall steady gains. And I'll just move to the next slide here, but I do want to point out that since our focus for this work here is really around middle schools and their feeders, I'm not going to be diving into the high school numbers specifically tonight. So here I'm starting to dive into demographic indicators that you'll be able to investigate on our web tool as well. These are just pie charts showing race and ethnicity breakdown of middle school neighborhood programs. And again, in the full slide deck, you'll be able to see this for all those schools. PPS tracks 8 different races and ethnicities that are listed in the bottom right there. And last chart, but again, not the last chart that you'll find if you're looking at the slide deck, the full deck. This one shows the breakdown of English language learners for the middle school focus option programs. So just a 2-color one here, and you see that breakdown can be quite different amongst even dual language immersion programs. Okay, so I want to give a shout out to the folks in the district's system planning and performance office who maintain a library of authoritative enrollment reports. All of the work that we do starts with the data that they collect and organize. And so there's a link here to their webpage, their data and report webpage, which includes a bunch of really great resources. And I've listed here what I think are some of their greatest hits. So really encourage folks to take a look at that. And I believe we're going to get this linked straight in from our data dashboard as well. So you can just have a one-stop shop for getting to all this stuff. Okay, so the baseline data dashboard. Our team has put together this baseline dashboard, which focuses on the 2021-22 school year. It's a web-based tool that allows you to filter enrollment information by school, program, and even down to the grade. Just some important notes here that I've alluded to a little bit earlier. So the enrollment counts are from the 2021 projection. We also have a lookout to 2025 as well that we really like to use as a planning tool, and you'll actually see is the default in many cases. The socioeconomic and demographic data is from the 2020 school year actual enrollment, so that last certified data that we have. And then finally, the school capacities that are used to calculate utilization. Those are from the PPS facilities database, and that's very recent from this month. So with that, I'm going to do a quick stop share, and I'm going to flip over to our trustee dashboard. And is a link going to go to that in the chat? It can. It's also, I believe, available through the slides there.
Hold on just 1 second. I'll have it in there.
Cool. Okay, I'm back sharing. And I actually want to start with a resource that's right up here at the top. So a good place I always recommend for folks to start is the instructions. And if you actually click on this button here, and let's see if I can flip to this seamlessly, you will pull up a PDF that is an annotated version of the dashboard that tells you what all the things do. And so for a lot of folks, this is going to probably be all you need, but I still want to walk through it with folks just to show you some of the resources here and just kind of its functionality. So we talked about racial equity impact measures. We put those right up at the top. And what we've done here is, in addition to the 4 that I had talked about earlier, we also just wanted to highlight the number of students that were affected by the change that was implemented from the 2020 to 2021 school year with the opening of Kellogg and the change to feeders there. We've also broken this out by Black and Native students, English language learners, and all students. So you can see the differential between those students here. And this will be something that we come back to as we start to look at scenarios that will be a way for us to really see at a high level, again, who is burdened and who benefits. So this is a filter-based tool. So right below the racial equity impact measures are the filters that you need to set. And the first thing that you are going to start with are the grades serviced. So we know that we've got, again, focusing on the elementary and middle grades, we've got 3 different flavors of schools for grade serviced. And I'm just going to isolate, in this case, 6-8. So I'm just seeing my true middle schools. Now I could click all here for grade group, but we know that middle school grade group is actually the only one that's applicable to this. So even if I have all of them applied, I'm still only going to see the same set of schools. So I click apply there. And then, hey, maybe I just want to check out Kellogg, Lane, and Mount Tabor and Roseway Heights. Let's check those ones out. All right, it updates there. So now I'm going to just walk you through the different sections of this. So the first section is all about enrollment. And as I mentioned, we have 2 of the projected enrollments, this quote unquote, this year's 2021 enrollment that allows us to have these numbers right here for Kellogg. This is the big push for having the 2021 information here. And as you saw, when you hover over, you can actually see at a grade level what those enrollment numbers are. You can see it for both the 2021 and the 2025 projections. You also see that this is broken out by the different programs that are under the roof of that particular school. And we have a shorthand here, which you can refer to down the bottom right corner that will tell you the full detail of what that shorthand actually means. So next is enrollment detail, kind of in the center of my page here. We've got some information about program capture rates. So that's essentially how many students are coming from within the attendance area the program is located in. Sometimes that's not applicable if it's a school that does not have an attendance area. And we've actually got this updating here. And I actually don't think that we have that information yet for Kellogg because that is to be determined. We don't have the geographies of those students yet, but you see it for the rest of these schools here. Then the next section here is focused on direct certification. So there's down in the notes, which I recommend everybody read at the bottom, there's an explanation of direct certification, but ultimately it is an economic indicator. It had traditionally been used to determine eligibility for free meals, but we've seen free meals expanded in some cases to all students. What we're just showing here is what that eligibility is amongst that student body for that particular program at the school. And just one thing to highlight here, we literally have highlighted when that percentage is above 33%, which is a threshold for Title I status. And you can see that we've got that at the program level, which Title I status is actually a school-wide status. So that is why you can hover over any of these yellow ones and see what the school-wide percentage is for that particular one. And we're looking at Roseway Heights here. Even though its components are a little bit different, it actually does put it over to 36.5% above that threshold. And then we get into some of the information that I shared before, just in a more tabular format. We have ELL students, the English language learners. We've added special education students here. That's one that I haven't shown you yet. We have Black and Native students, which were a part of the race and ethnicity breakout. And we've isolated this group specifically, but we also have in the entire BIPOC group, which you can see here, broken out by specific percentages if you hover over. And then finally on down to the utilization and map pane. So I'm going to start with the bar chart here. This is maybe my favorite area of the dashboard. But what it lets us do is start to see, again, I talked about some of those minimum thresholds that we're looking at with respect to both utilization and enrollment at different schools. And you see that we have those lines across for the minimum enrollment for target for middle school and elementary here. And I can see at a glance that Lane Middle School is below that 500 minimum enrollment that we'd like to see, and is currently sitting at 47% utilization of its 770 student capacity. Now note here that this is based off, and like I mentioned, many of the times the default here is the 2025 school year. We can actually change that to look at the 2021 as well. And you see that that number is a little bit better for Lane, but again, reflects those enrollment declines that we're seeing throughout this part of the district for these grade groups. And then finally, there's a map here on the side that isolates to just the attendance areas for the schools that you have selected. This, you do need to have either middle schools or elementary schools selected because they can't show up at the same time. They will overlap each other, obviously, but you can hover over and get some information about each of these attendance areas. We know that this one is Selwood. We know that its grade configuration is 6 through 8, and we see some information about its utilization for those projection years. And you can really zoom in here. Let's say I want to know what the northern boundary of that particular school is. It's Hawthorne in this case. And then I can just click the home button here to go back to that full extent. And then finally, notes and reference data. So we have some static maps that we understand are going to be a little bit more user-friendly for those folks that really want to dive in and look at some detail. This little window pane here is not as easy to work with as some of these other maps. So I just want to quickly flip through those. We have an overview of the entire study area here of Southeast. So I'm just starting at the bottom of this map here to show you what is shown. You can just scroll up here to see all the different schools, the co-located programs. They're colored by, the schools themselves are colored by their grade configuration. And then you see the attendance areas of the middle schools in the color shading and the attendance areas of the elementary schools in sort of the dark gray boundary. And that is all explained here in the key at the bottom. We also have a map book that's a zoom in of each individual school. So here's just an example of what that looks like for Creston. So just for a little bit more detail on the roads and those sorts of things. And then finally, this was something that was really useful for folks in our last round here, which is a map that shows a couple of things. First, in this case, where our non-English speaking native Spanish speakers are concentrated. And that's sort of this heat map here that I'm going to scroll up and show you here. So it's kind of the semi-transparent blobby stuff here. And then also on top of that, we have the points of the student locations who attend Spanish dual language immersion programs, and they're colored by the different schools that they attend. And so we have those for each of the Spanish immersion, or sorry, for each of the dual language immersion programs, as well as for the creative science program. Okay, and I'm going to stop my share. And I'm just going to get back to my slide deck really quickly here. Sorry, I'm like mission control here with all the different screens. Okay. I think we're here. So just a couple more notes that I wanted to offer up before we get into our next exercise. And that is for folks that start to look at this, I mean, what we're really trying to get at here is an understanding of the baseline from where we start. But as you start to think about what we're trying to achieve here, I think what's going to become really clear to folks is that first off, there's not a lot of students to go around if we're trying to meet all those minimum enrollment goals. And it's not as easy as just spreading students around evenly, because as you'll see with school locations, we don't get to pick up and put those schools in the most convenient location. And sometimes they are not conveniently located relative to what we're trying to accomplish. And then finally, cohorts move together. They tend to move together. So if we're thinking about picking up a dual language immersion program and moving it to another school as an example, you'll see that that has some constraints to it with respect to, again, like getting the balance that we're looking for. So I just want folks to start to carry that around in their mind as they're looking at the baseline dashboard here. And final thing, before we go into the breakout rooms, I'm going to offer some office hours on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I think it's going to go out with the after meeting notes for folks that if you have any problems using the tool, that I can help you work through that. So I hope that from between this little demonstration, especially that nice user guide and the office hours, we can get folks where they need to be. So with that, I think we're ready to get folks teed up for a breakout room session here. And what we're going to be doing is we've got 3 different breakout rooms. You'll have a representative from Flow in each and a representative from Brick in each, as well as one of the ASDs from PPS there. What we're going to do to start is we're going to have 6 questions for folks to answer on their own using the dashboard. And what we can do there is just, you can turn off your screens. We'll just have up the questions so you know which ones to answer on our shared screen. And you can work through that. We can go dark for 10 minutes and then we'll come back and we'll compare notes on what we got. And then there are 3 open-ended questions that we'll go through together as a group. So I think with that, is there anything from my other co-MCs that I'm forgetting or missing before we jump into those breakout groups?
Yep, we're going to have the breakout rooms just a little bit short because we're a little bit behind time. So we'll probably do about
We'll
18.
wrap at 7:25. Yep.
Okay. Well, Marnie, if you're the one pulling the trigger, sorry, I didn't mean to say that. If you are the one putting us in the room, please do.
I think Nathan is actually sending us
Okay.
right now.
Here. Hoping that you all are seeing my full presentation. Can I get a thumbs up? Okay, great. So really what we want to do kind of in the second half, or if you will, of the meeting is really talk about kind of the listening and learning exercises that we're going through, right? So we want to model a little bit our approach to the community-based affinity dialogue sessions and talk about those kind of in greater context. So we are really focused in doing this work in a way that that allows us to, like I said, start to identify what are the challenges that our families are having. So we've identified kind of a set of what we call tier 1 and tier 2 questions. They are mostly about kind of how connected people feel to their school, kind of what they need or what their children need to succeed, kind of talking people through that balance between proximity versus access to greater programs, kind of where people sit on that spectrum, looking at what are some potential obstacles for people in terms of their neighborhood, transportation, where are their concerns. And then 2 questions that we will kind of use tonight are 2 of the questions that we have in our kind of question deck. There's about 12 questions that we're asking in these sessions. We've got, I think, 15 of them set up that we're doing. And so 15 sessions that we're doing, and we're asking the same 12 questions, many in native languages. So we're doing these in Somali, in both Cantonese and Mandarin, in Spanish, and in Russian. I believe those are the languages that, and then obviously in English. And so the questions that we will be asking each other or asking you to consider today are, as we break into those same small groups that we were in earlier when we were working with Jed, and an idea, trying to get an idea of what do your children and those in the communities most impacted by inequity need to be successful in school, right? And to what degree does your current school provide that? Again, doing this in a way to kind of daylight what potentially some of the issues are, and then trying to focus down in kind of that tier 2 questioning, which is thinking about the intent to redistribute enrollment and programs across the district or across Southeast. What are your greatest hopes for this effort, and what are your greatest fears, right? So what we're going to do is Marnie or Nathan, I don't know quite who, is going to send us, is going to send us back into our focus groups, and we're going to just spend some time talking through these questions ourselves and starting to get a better understanding of where at least we are as a Southeast Guiding Coalition. Does anyone have any questions about the questions or about the process before we go there? Hearing none. All right, Marnie.
Okay, so again, let's remember that we're going to focus on what matters. We're going to listen, I like to say deliciously. So act like you can't get enough of each other to hear what other people have to say. Listen to understand, don't listen to speak. And also listen together for patterns or insights and recognize how you are all answering these questions. Okay, so I am going to send us all off. I put the questions in the chat again, and again, one of us will be in a room with each of you. So hold on to your seats and off we go.
Recording stopped.
conversation. We had great conversation in our room. It sounds like you did as well, but it is talk about accepting and expecting non-closure, right?
Mhm.
Right, I'm going to share my screen again. Bear with me. I believe we have everyone back, or are we still waiting for some rooms to come back, Marnie?
No, that's everyone.
All right. So let me. Okay. Bear with me. I'm going to share my screen again. Marnie, would give me somebody give me a heads up. Can you see my screen? All right, good, thank you. So we wanted to spend a few minutes really just kind of making some sense of what we heard, kind of talking together about, you know, not just kind of how was that experience, but what struck you? What were some things that, you know, if we think about this as a process that we're going to use, kind of the conversations that we had in community and in our small groups, and expanding that to ask kind of the deeper level questions around what we were trying to get at, right? What are the challenges that you're seeing in your school community, and how can the process that we're going through to kind of redistribute enrollment and programs either help, or quite frankly, what are some things that we need to worry about that it could actually hurt, right? So if you're thinking about kind of the process that we just went through and being able to do that in communities, not just around Lane and Harrison Park, but then also the elementary schools that feed into them. What do you see? How was your experience, and what struck you, and maybe what do you see as barriers to BIPOC and underserved communities in this process? Anyone? I know there were folks in my room that talked about kind of the process and thinking about ways that, you know, I'm not going to call you out, Leah, but what are some challenges, you know, given where we're living today, right? Kind of in this COVID world, what do you see as some potential challenges for us being able to get some of those firsthand experiences?
Well, I think that, you know, I kind of talked to this, that people have been stretched then throughout the pandemic, but especially our BIPOC families and the community I serve, and just the ability to make, you know, put one foot in front of another each day, and just being mindful of what parents have the capacity to do. If that means showing up to a meeting, if it means voicing their opinions. And so we really have to think of alternative ways to get their input and make sure that their voices are heard. And then also, I think, and I mentioned this in our small groups, is being really mindful of how things will really be shifting in our communities because of the last year and a half or 2 years and what we've been through. And things may look different when the dust settles and we see who is really sitting in front of us. I think of the housing market in Portland is, you know, definitely changed in the last year. So there's just a lot of those things to take into consideration as we move forward.
Anyone else? Maybe just even how was this experience for you? What are some things that it brought up for you in terms of thinking about some of these things? Are you now thinking about our work differently? Don't all rush to speak at once. Okay, we've got some dead air here. And I appreciate that it's 8:15 at night, so. But I think it's important for us, you know, that are designing these engagement exercises to just understand, are we approaching this from the right way, right? Is this something that you all, in doing the work, if you imagine we have these conversations in community with those most impacted, do you see that us bringing you that firsthand experience is going to make a difference in terms of the work that you're doing?
And I
Please
just,
also go. Please.
I'm trying not to talk too much, but I want to say that I think in the first round, I was among those that really wanted PPS to bring the voices of more constituencies and a more diverse audience. And I really appreciate the focus on bringing those voices to the table. And I'm sitting with a tremendous amount of responsibility to figure out how to, sorry, address these issues. I think you get the point. I like, now that PPS has come back with a lot of this work, I'm feeling very responsible to delivering on that.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie that that wasn't intentional, right? I mean, I think there is some sort of intentional accountability that we wanted to bring into the group through that process for sure. Yeah. Anyone else? Maybe those of you that are in school communities can talk a little bit about, you know, what do you see any barriers to BIPOC and underserved communities participating in these sessions, and what are some strategies that maybe you can recommend to us to think about things differently? We are going to, as part of this, I will kind of let the cat out of the bag, kind of enlist each of you as ambassadors to get the word out in your own communities so that we can reach greater, more diverse audiences and have them be part of these conversations. But anyone else? How was that experience? What did it bring up for you? Let's see.
So Karina, I am sure that your organization has done fabulous work with BIPOC communities, but I will tell you, in some of my schools, there's a sense of cynicism about the work because according to them, you know, we have these conversations every so often and nothing really changes. So so it almost seems to me like in an attempt for us to get them to participate, there almost has to be an assurance that something will change. And I'm not sure how we get to that beyond, you know, especially since we have a history that seems to right now overwhelm the whole idea that something will change.
Yeah, you know, thank you for that, Esther. Like I said, that is why we were proposing this process, right? Because to build in that accountability, and to ensure, you know, one of the things that you may have seen if you were kind of examining the schedule that we had earlier on and the schedule that we have now, we took the schedule and we lengthened it, and we said, we're going to pause from creating scenarios right now, because if we make scenarios without listening to these communities, and before we listen to these communities, then everything that you just talked about, Esther, is what people are going to feel. Why are you coming to me when you've already made up your minds, right? And so there is deep commitment on behalf of not only our team, but the district team working on this, that the very input that we get is going to shape the scenarios that we determine. And that's not to say that we're going to develop the ideal scenario for every community, because just even in the group that we were in, just looking at kind of the enormity of what we're trying to do, it's difficult, but we're hopeful we created a process that will allow us to be accountable not only to each other, but to those communities that we listen to.
And you are correct. The question is, how do we get them to believe it enough?
True. Yeah, and you know, I mean, we can talk through some of the things that we're doing. You know, we are asking the trusted ambassadors in these schools to make those outreach, to do that outreach for us, right? Because we know they don't know me from Adam, quite frankly, or some of the folks at the district office. But going in and having folks like Naima at Harrison Park reach out to the Somali community and say, you know, these are people that really do want to listen with their heart and their head and come and join us. I think those are the most impactful ways that we're going to be able to do this. Anyone else?
So this is Mims Rouse, and you know, I'm pretty new to this process. I'm still not quite sure how I got invited to the meeting, um, but I'm so happy to be here. And I'm wondering, just from a strategy standpoint, have you nailed down maybe the 3 top concerns of, let's say, Black or African American parents and students? And how do you keep that in front of them, that concern, and your effort to address that concern? Because I think that that's one real way to get that buy-in, is to say that we hear you, these are your 3 concerns, and these are the efforts, and show, quarter after quarter or year after year, this is now where we stand, right, even if it's regression.
Yeah, I will say we haven't, we still have probably about 10 of these still to have. So I wouldn't say that I'm ready to say that I know what the top 3 concerns are quite yet. But what we are intending to do is not only bring those concerns by demographic to you, but then also share them back with their communities and keep those concerns, kind of keep what we heard in listening and learning as a lens by which not only do we as the Southeast Guiding Coalition evaluate the scenarios, but then also when we go back out to these communities, we say, this is what we heard from you. And because of that, this is what we've done in this scenario, right? And did we get it right? Did we not get it right? Right? Because I think you're exactly right, Mims, that has to be reflected back to show, to build on that accountability that Esther talked about, right? That we heard you. First of all, did we get it right? Because we don't want to assume that we heard you, but then what are we going to do with it? Did that answer your question, Mims?
It absolutely did. And I would say this, is that, I would love to see what demographics, like I said, I'm new to this meeting. I'd love to know what demographics you've identified in this process.
Yeah, I can talk about it in generalities. We can also send out the flyer to you all. We will be sending that out because, like I said, I want you to get it in the hands of people that you know that meet those groups. But we're doing, we are focusing on the Black community, specifically the Somali community, because we recognize that as immigrants, those are different communities. The Latinx community, Chinese community, because of the DLI input, the Russian community. And we're doing this by school. So for Lane and for Harrison Park, we're having BIPOC conversations with students, staff at each of the schools. And then we are opening it up exclusively to BIPOC families in what we're calling kind of the surrounding schools. So all of the feeder schools into those programs. Shanice, Judy, let me know if I missed anybody. Elisa, I think those are the main groups. And we're doing them in the native languages, having interpreters at every meeting. Some of them we can do directly and some of them require translators. If that helps, Mim, set the stage.
It does. And I'm very much interested in what the findings are related to African American and specifically African American boys. And so, I'm eager to see that.
Likewise. Well, we are excited to be able to bring that back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? I guess one last question I'll ask is, if you're thinking about even the conversation that we had in our small group, does any of that make you think about our work in a different way? Right? Does it give you new perspective? Does it, yeah. I mean, I'm reflecting back on some of the things that we talked about in our group and some of the challenges that we have of kind of ensuring that we keep those most impacted front of mind moving forward, right? Anyone else want to share? Any questions? Okay. Oh, go ahead, Margaret.
I just wanted to first thank people for leaning in and engaging and listening. And so I'm fairly new to my role. I'm Esther's counterpart at the secondary level, so at middle and high school. And you know, I've been working in Portland Public Schools for over 20 years, and have been part of at least 3 different enrollment balancing conversations over the year. And I think that a lot of the sentiments people are expressing resonate and also sound familiar. And so the question, I think, about accountability and but the notion of what does it mean to get something right is really a critical one, as is the notion of making sure. I really appreciate you saying that we want to go back to communities and reflect what we heard and make sure that there's that feedback loop. I think that part of what you know, that so much of what happens, it has to be played out, and it's, you have to, the talking, it has to show up in the work, right? Like it has to show up in our actions, and those are often separated from the initial conversation, right? So we can't forget to go back after some decisions get made or some proposals get put forth, and say, you know, how do we check back in and see how we're doing? So it's one of the real challenges in education is to stay focused on certain things, and we kind of jump to the next, and then like, so how do we come back and say this is a touch point and we should do, is it every 2 years, is it every, you know, how often? Because you know, systems are fluid and they don't stay in balance. You may get something in balance for a while, but it doesn't stay that way for like forever. And so what are our commitments to processes that allow us to come back and check in regularly?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Margaret. You know, I think in terms of one of the things that I didn't talk about in terms of our engagement approaches, it does have 3 phases. We're in the listening and learning phase, but then once we start to create the scenarios, we go into ideas and input, where we do that first level of check back with folks through our larger community engagement. And then the last phase of our engagement approach with the larger community, we're calling outcomes and accountability, right? To continue to create those checkbacks of, this is what we heard from the people who we most want to center in this work. Did we get it right? So yeah, thank you everybody for your sharing on that this evening. So with that, I think I'm going to transition it to Shanice to talk a little bit around the phase 1 engagement summary.
Thank you, Karina, and I appreciated hearing perspectives from folks tonight. And I think it's absolutely important as we're reflecting on how we circle back and remember the input we've received already from students, families, and community. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about this, and it's information that we talked about before. And there are some reference tools as well. In the meeting packet, you'll see a 1-pager, and that's a reference for some highlights from our engagement. But know that our website at pps.net/enrollment balancing does have that really comprehensive and direct quotes as well from our students and families. But we know that our racial equity and social justice framework really called upon the way we designed our process and worked with each other to do this work. And so that really informed getting feedback from our Black, Indigenous, and communities of color, in addition to our multilingual communities that we are continuing to hear from in the phase 2 process. But these are some of the methods that we used, and not all, but through virtual connections, open houses, focus groups, student surveys, teacher groups, a number of spaces were cultivated to hear from our communities. And we can move to the next slide. So our really, I think, robust process was just a starting place, but we were able to hear from a wide range of folks, and from our 6 major languages here: Russian, Spanish, Somali, Vietnamese, Mandarin, and English, and had online inquiries. And during our open house week, worked with about 1,200 folks. But we know that this is just a highlight, right, of some of the number of folks that we have heard from. So a really rich, I think, robust feedback we've heard, but really aligned with themes and commonalities. And so I think an example of that is hearing from our students that there is a wide range of support for Harrison Park being dedicated to a middle school. Yes, so the week of our open house, we did have 1,200 folks engage with us. So we were definitely spending a lot of time during the holiday season in November, really spending time analyzing and connecting those themes to bring forward and work with the coalition and our board. And so if we move to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about 2 things, our themes and challenges from the process, and know that there is this extended view that you're able to have in 2 places. But I know we were able to kind of identify that the co-located programs did create some difficulties for schools, and having that devotion entirely to a focus option program had implications to student experiences. But there's other elements that were very salient during our phase 1 process, including just our definitions of equity really varying, and having elements like overcrowding, transportation impacts, the relocation of our creative science school program, and portable classrooms being things we want to limit, avoid, and really be cautious about as we consider the impacts of. We were really able to hold dedicated spaces, though, for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and multilingual people, as we reflected on some of the numbers of folks that we heard from. But they really echoed these themes and challenges, and also highlighted that time, right, especially during a pandemic, is essential to really understand what the proposal will be and what changes will be offered. And so building in this multi-step process in phase 2, where we have the listening and learning phase, is a hope to support that space as well. And in addition, that continued conversation around the proximity to neighborhood schools and home being important, and something that we heard come up frequently from our families, and especially BIPOC communities. We know that the social and emotional needs of our students is something that needs to be prioritized in our work, and in addition to different needs, especially that proximity to school and transportation. But the last piece that I will wanted to kind of highlight is the open house and public engagement kind of week opportunities, and know we had some of these themes that we continue to hear in that space as well, but know that the voices of our students and community prior to the decision-making phase is something we heard loud and clear that needs to be prioritized. In addition to keep thinking about these themes listed here as something that families are having I think an investment in wanting to create solutions for. And so there's an overall, especially support for Kellogg and comprehensive middle schools. And so I think what I'll just reiterate at 2 places, our meeting materials has the 1-pager, but on the website for enrollment balancing, there's a whole archive from today into phase 1, where you'll see links to this kind of broken down by demographic, in addition to these different areas of the phase 1 process that took in input, especially from our open house week and from focus groups. I know we have the link in the chat. Thank you, Megan, for sharing. And we can move to the next slide and believe we'll be hearing from Esther.
Indeed, I think the next slide is kind of our checkout question, but I'm just going to actually stop sharing. And Esther, do you want to go ahead and close this out before we get to the final checkout?
Yes. Well, I do want to take time to thank everybody for engaging in these conversations. I know that we are in our listening phase. I also know that it's a lot to think about, but the fact that you're willing to participate after a long day at work is a testament to your commitment to the process. And I want to start off by saying thank you very much. So in closing, I also want to acknowledge that the district leadership does appreciate your participation, and they do hope that you will stick with us through the end so that we can all work collaboratively together in the best interest of all our students. We look forward to having a home for the K-5 students at Harrison Park Middle School right now, and also increasing the enrollment at Lane Middle School. Please remember to complete your feedback form before you leave. The feedback form is very essential for us. It helps us to plan meetings going forward. We also want to make sure that your thoughts, your ideas, your suggestions are taken into consideration as we plan. You are also welcome to email your feedback to Megan or to Judy Brennan. If for any reason after you leave the meeting today, you remember there was something else you needed to talk about. Our next meeting will be on the 7th of October. In that meeting, we'll receive and respond to BRIC Listening and Learning Report. We'll also receive staff direction for Creative Science School and DLI programs, and we'll listen to fall enrollment counts and potential impact on our neighborhood schools and boundaries. That said, I do want to turn the meeting over to Marnie for our checkout.
Marnie might be frozen, so I might have to take it for her.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Esther. I want to echo our team's thank you for your participation with us tonight. Really, the meeting evaluation form link is in the chat. We really want you to help us make this process better for you. So please chime in. The other thing that you will see in the chat is the focus group flyer. So this is specifically the flyer that outlines the dates and times for those conversations in community, the listening and learning conversations. And it has a bit.ly link for families to register. So if you know of families that are that fall into those demographics, please ask them to join us in this work. So we really appreciate that. So, oh, Beth, do you have a question or you just, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to be really clear. So like, I'm a Hosford family, so we are not looking for input from these communities within Hosford or Mount Tabor or other middle schools at this point.
I think we are. I think if there's kind of an all area school BIPOC. Right?
Okay.
Those would
Okay.
be the sessions that we would be directing them towards, Beth, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So I think our last share, or what we're hoping to get in these last closing minutes, is just kind of what is one thing that you'll take with you tonight? If anyone will share kind of with us 1 or 2 shares just as we kind of close out of this.
So you can go ahead and put it in the chat, and if everybody answers in the chat, it will sort of solidify it for you, and it's also you speaking it to each other, even if it's in words. And then we'd also love to hear some of your voices.
And Megan, we have the, yeah, there we go. We have the chat on for folks, right? It's enabled. Okay, yeah.
So we like to do a check-in at the beginning, which sort of puts all the voices in the room. Even when you're in small rooms, your voices combine to the large room. And that makes us all community. It puts us all together with a check-in. And we do the same thing with a checkout. It kind of closes the unit of work and lets us sort of tie a bow on this as much as we can, energetically, I guess, and then move on. So thinking of all the things you heard, we heard the data tonight. We looked at schools kind of through a lens of numbers and charts. We also heard from your hearts about what it feels like and how it really is. And both of those are the full story that we got to see tonight. So if you think back kind of on the 3 hours that we spent together, it's something that you would take with you. Thank you for sharing in the chat. Would anyone like to give voice? Something that you felt today and are going to take with you? Thank you. Mm-hmm. I'm reading the chat and mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I would like to say, to see your passion and to hear your passion, and I really feel like I saw your hearts tonight, was an honor to witness. You have a big job ahead of you, and no one is taking it lightly.
Yeah. Shout out to the data nerds, Jen.
Of which I am one, not a club. Would anyone like to read what they've put in the chat so we can have a voice?
Maybe that's why they use the chat, because they don't want to read it into the room. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Hear a lot of appreciation and gratitude in the chat. How about from the facilitators? What are you taking with you? What did you hear?
I guess from my perspective, I am probably taking a fairly great sense of responsibility to go and get the firsthand experiences and to bring them back to the group and to try and create a process, co-create along with the district a process that keeps us focused where we say we want to be focused. All right, everyone. Well, thank you all so much for giving us your time on a Thursday evening. I think it's Thursday. All the days it's Groundhog's Day, right? But thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you again on. Yeah, it doesn't even matter, right?
No idea.
It's all relative. But I hope you were able to enjoy what looks to be probably a fairly wet weekend. And we will see you all back on October 7th. Thank you again. Yeah, thank you for your time. Good night.